Before we begin, I must tell you one thing. If you do not believe in the heavenly books, if you don't believe in the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran, then you will never understand what I am about to say. Magic and the jinn are mentioned in all the holy scriptures, and my story is rooted in that reality. I am not here to tell you myths about vampires or zombies. I am here to tell you about the raw truth of African magic, and specifically the horrors of Arabian sorcery. Listen closely, because this is not a movie. This was my life. In one of Cairo's hospitals, thousands of people gathered. The scene was utterly majestic. In front of the hospital, there were men and women in a state of wailing and loud crying. The reason was that Sheikh Mohammed had passed away at the age of only 52. But he was still young and his health was good, said the nurse Hanan to Hassan, Sheikh Mohammed's assistant. Here, Hassan replied to her in extreme distress while crying bitterly. He was the greatest sheikh in expelling spirits, and he was in excellent health until 5 days ago, after a session to expel a jinn from the body of Saba. And he continued with intense crying. At that time, curiosity was almost killing Hanan, but she wasn't able to ask him more than that. The man was collapsing from crying. Hanan patted Hassan's shoulder and said to him, "Just come sit here and drink this cup of anise. It will calm you down." The anise was hers, but her curiosity made her give up the anisa in exchange for knowing the story. And indeed, Hassan sat on the chair, but didn't even look at the cup of anise, and continued his story while staring blankly, as if he were not conscious. He said, "This Sabah is the mother of 2 boys and a young girl aged 34. Her husband, Sami, called me while he was collapsing and crying, unable to gather his words. He said to me in the form of a question, 'Sheikh Mohammed?' I replied to him and said, 'No, I am Hassan, the assistant of Sheikh Mohammed.' He spoke in despair, as if he had been waiting to hear the voice of Sheikh Mohammed. 'I kiss your feet, give me Sheikh Mohammed.' I told him, 'I told you I am his assistant. Tell me what you want and I will benefit you.' He said to me while panting as if a train was running behind him, 'A jinn is on my wife. He makes her do strange things and she dies 1,000 times every minute.' I replied to him and said, 'Just calm down and make me understand more. What does your wife do exactly?' He said to me while puffing, 'Sir, come and see for yourself what is happening to her. I don't know how to explain it.' I told him, 'Oh, protector Lord, to this extent,' he said while getting angry. 'Sheikh Hassan, I kiss your feet, I kiss your hand, I want Sheikh Mohammed.' I told him, 'Fine, 5 minutes and I will tell you the opinion of Sheikh Mohammed, whether he will come or not.' Sami had collapsed and his voice was choked with crying as he said to me, 'My wife is dying, my wife is truly dying. And he kept crying and he was crying very bitterly. So I told him, 'Fine, calm down Mr. Sami. Today at 8 o'clock after the Isha prayer, Sheikh Mohammed will be with you by the will of our Lord.' Hassan looked at Hanan and said to her while staring into her face as if he didn't see her features at all. And indeed, we went at the scheduled time to a building in Al-Madi. This apartment was on the 2nd floor. The apartment's furniture was beautiful, but half of it was broken, as if a professional wrestling match had taken place there. The TV was smashed and the recorder was on, playing the Quran at a very high volume. Those who received us were 4 people and 3 children whose ages were close. I entered before Sheikh Mohammed, and as soon as Sheikh Mohammed entered, he said, I seek refuge in Allah. His face began to change and anxiety began. I have been with Sheikh Mohammed for 15 years. Every day we used to see 3 or 4 cases possessed by jinn, but it was the first time I saw his face in that way. Anyway, we met the people, and those present were Saba's mother. Her name is Hajja Tahani, Sami, Saba's husband, and Seham, Saba's older sister. As for Ali, he is Saba's brother, approximately 27 or 28 years old, a young man with an athletic body. Of course, they welcomed us and asked us to sit on wooden chairs. Their shape, didn't match the apartment's furniture at all. We sat down and they asked us to drink something so they could tell us the story. Sheikh Mohammed signaled with his hands without uttering a word that he would not sit. Since I understand Sheikh Mohammed, I knew what he wanted. I told them, "No, we just want to see Mrs. Saba." Her husband said, "She is here in the room over there," pointing to a room at the end of a hallway. Sheikh Mohammed entered first and I entered behind him and the rest of the family followed me. Sheikh Mohammed opened the door with extreme calmness. Saba was lying on a bed wearing pajamas and they had tied her hands and feet to the 4 corners of the bed. Upon Sheikh Mohammed's entry, Saba began to writhe like a snake and she was laughing with a very coarse voice. The voice was not the voice of a woman of this beauty at all. She said, "How are you, Mohammed?" Sheikh Mohammed replied in sorrow. I was the only one who understood its meaning, that the situation was not good and that the one on her was very difficult and that we would get tired this night. Sheikh Mohammed said to her, "Who are you?" Saba replied with the same coarse voice and her body began to relax on the bed and she stopped writhing and said, "I am Samuel." Sheikh Mohammed replied while biting his lips, "How old are you?" Samuel replied in a mocking way and said, "Ha! And what is it to you how old I am? What difference will it make to you? Are you bringing me a bride?" And he laughed a laugh that sucked out the souls of everyone in the room and accelerated my heartbeat. Sheikh Mohammed continued without showing any interest in the mockery and said, "Fine. Whose son are you from the people of the jinn and from which tribe?" Samuel replied with the same mockery, "No, it seems I misunderstood you. It appears that you are the one who wants to marry into our family." And he laughed the same laugh. Sheikh Mohammed replied firmly while shouting at Samuel, "Straighten up, Samuel. You know who I have with me. So answer my questions for your own good." Samuel replied in a very terrifying voice that was double and scary. "No, no, 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 I am telling you what. Don't try to act tough on me, Sheikh. You found out from those with you, those who won't be able to help you and who didn't even want to enter with you, who I am. So don't threaten me because you know the punishment for that very well. I chose by myself to talk to you, and you know that if I wanted to kill them all, I could have done so long ago." Sheikh Mohammed replied in anxiety and tension. All the people present were looking into Sheikh Mohammed's eyes, but Sheikh Mohammed ignored all of that and didn't look into the face of any of them. In fact, from the moment he entered, he was looking at the ground. He hadn't even seen Saba's position on the bed. Then he said, "Fine, Samuel, tell me, why did you enter Saba's body?" Samuel replied in a victorious tone, "Yes. Now these are the questions I like. Not whose son are you and how old are you?" And he replied with dismissiveness, "I am just like you, Mr. Sheikh. I am here on a job." Sheikh Mohammed replied while looking at Saba's face for the first time and said to Samuel in surprise, "What does that mean? I don't understand." Samuel replied while speaking with absolute calmness, I am a servant to a great sorcerer named Mahmud, living here in the Muqattam mountain, and I entered Sabah's body by his command. Sheikh Mohammed sat on a chair next to the bed, crossed his legs and said, "Fine Samuel, why did he make you enter Sabah's body, and why does he want to harm her?" Samuel replied with the same calmness and the same terrifying voice, "No, he doesn't know her, nor does he have any relation to her." Samuel looked at Sheikh Mohammed and brought his face close to Sheikh Mohammed's face, and his eyes had no pupils, they were entirely white, and he continued in a voice audible to everyone, "He took the price of torturing Sabah until death. He took the order to torture Sabah until death." Here, Sheikh Ramadan was terrified and said in a voice broken by fear and anxiety, "Yes, you took the order to torture Sabah until she dies. You will die yourself now before you even think of hurting her." Samuel laughed harder than before, to the point that tears fell from Hajatahani and Siham. In the same second, their two bodies jumped in the same way like a mirror reflection. He said, "Of course I will stay in her body and torture her until she dies. She is not the first or the last one I kill in this way. Honestly, I enjoy this. I tell you, Sheikh, I will leave you alive to see this moment. I won't kill you before it. I will burn her in front of your eyes, piece by piece, and I will hear her screaming." Sheikh Ramadan waited with his eyebrows raised. "Okay, Samuel. Why don't you leave her and go wherever you want, or go back to where you came from before I burn you?" Samuel replied, acting regretful and shaking his head right and left, "You know I can't leave her and go back to where I came from. If I go out, the sorcerer Mahmud will burn me." Sheikh Ramadan leaned his back on the chair, crossed his arms and said, "Samuel, who agreed with the sorcerer to hurt Sabah?" Samuel replied in protest, "Imagine, the one who did this is one of her relatives who ate bread and salt with her and yet wants to see her tortured until death." He roughened his voice a bit and said, "This kind of human sheikh has no security." Sheikh Mohammed looked at the ground again and said, "Tell me, Samuel, how were you torturing her? What were you doing to her?" Samuel replied after putting his head, or Sabah's head, back on the pillow and looked at the ceiling, where there was a black vortex like time gaps. "Sabah is the least one I hurt. She is weak. If I increased it, she would die too early, and I don't want that. For example, I used to grow ulcers in her liver and sear them with acid, fire, water. She couldn't scream with that amount of pain because she was afraid of terrifying her children. She was holding herself. Tears were falling from her eyes faster than lightning from the intensity of the pain. When she came to pray, I would paralyze her legs and fix nails in her leg bones from the hip bone to the foot. I would silence her tongue so she wouldn't scream. I would grab her heart with my hands until she choked and gasped the gasp of death. To make it last longer, I would leave her heart for a while and then grab it again. I was burning her lung to the point that smoke came out of her mouth. If you saw her lung, you would find it black and charred from the burning I did to her. I blinded her eyes from her children, husband, and loved ones. I showed her pictures of demons and devils, and I blocked her ears from any sentence of pity, compliment, or comfort. Do you know she hasn't known anything but terror, panic, fatigue, and illness for 2 years? Do you also know that I wrote spells inside her body? I wrote Ayat al-Kursi in reverse on her kidneys and carved the names of the jinn kings on her skin from inside her body. I grew pus inside her body to poison her and filled her wounds with worms to eat her. I made her hate her husband, children, mother, and sister sister and I planted in their minds situations that never happened. Do you know she wishes for death every second? Do you know I could have killed her on the first day, but I enjoy her torture? Here, Samuel sat up and looked at Sammy and said, "Do you remember when you sat next to her 2 weeks ago and put your hands on her hair? Her hair came out in your hands, and there were worms in it, and you were disgusted by it, and didn't sit next to her again. At that time you wished for her death." Sammy was very embarrassed, looking at people's faces with half an eye, and said, Yes, I remember." Samuel said, "Your hands had nothing in them. It was me who was playing with you." Sammy said angrily, "Oh, you dog," and was moving quickly towards Samuel. With a movement from Samuel's tied hands, Sammy flew in the air and hit his back against the wardrobe, breaking it, and fell to the ground, unable to move after that. "Here!" Samuel said with anger and a voice stronger than a lion's roar. "Stay in your place before I burn her in front of you. She only has a few hours left in her life." That last laugh made Haja Tahani lose consciousness for 30 seconds. Samuel continued his speech and said, "And you, Seham, do you remember when you held her hand and saw written in the palm of her hand, Khaled, your husband's name? You wanted to strangle her with your hands, and since then you haven't entered the house until today, and your husband hasn't entered this house again." Seham replied, grinding her teeth, "Yes, I remember. But guys, what was I supposed to do while seeing my husband's name on my sister's hand?" And she cried bitterly. Samuel replied in a state of ecstasy, "I am the one who wrote your husband's name on her hand. And you, Hajja Tahani, do you remember when you saw your stolen gold necklace around Saba's neck and you begrudged your service to her and having her in your house?" Hajja Tahani replied with extreme sharpness while still recovering from the fainting caused by Samuel's laugh. "It didn't happen. It didn't happen." Samuel replied mockingly, "Isn't it a shame to be a Hajja and a liar? You feared me, you hated me. If you still see that I am a victim like Saba and that I am a servant under orders, listen to the story of my life with victims who were tortured more than Saba. Maybe you will change your mind. My life in the world of jinn was not very enjoyable. It was ordinary, between wars between jinn tribes over control and separation between different types of jinn. I mean, nothing new, but here with you, the matter is very enjoyable, honestly, because there is a pleasure in torture, humiliation, insult, weakness, despair, and pain. By the way, I don't do this on my own. I barely execute what people wish for each other. For example, a woman named Suad wanted to see her husband humiliated before her. The sorcerer Mahmoud asked her for something of his traces, preferably hair. She brought a good amount of hair and one of his shirts. The sorcerer Mahmoud took them and tied the hair in a knot from the threads of a black horse's tail, a feather from a crow's wing, and put them all in a hyena's skull. He ground specific beetles over them, not just anything, with a piece of skin from a human corpse on which the talisman was written with a red pen. It was soaked for 2 days in the blood of the crow, from which he took the feather and left for 2 days to dry. Then he ground them until they were like powder and wrapped them in the skin that contained the talisman. After that, he gave this mixture to Suad and told her, "Buy a sheep and put this powder in the water the sheep drinks and hide it from people's sight. If this sheep dies, Suad, the magic of this work will vanish." Of course, before Suad left, she gave the sorcerer Mahmoud 2 bags full of money because she was rich, but her husband wanted to marry another woman. Sowad's husband was named Samir. He was a handsome man, tall and broad with green eyes. Samuel laughed a laugh that shook the walls of the room, but we were not afraid anymore. We were used to it. Samuel continued and said, she used to enjoy it when she ordered him to cut off one of his fingers, and she would take a finger and put it in his eyes and tell him, "Isn't this what you used to hit me with?" She used to make him extinguish her cigarette in his chest as well. She also made him cut his skin and feed his flesh to the villa's guard dogs. She once ordered him to bite his own palm. She wanted him to cut off his hands with his mouth. He said sadly, but unfortunately he didn't know how. He looked at Sheikh Mohammed and said, "What can you do, Sheikh? Human teeth don't break bones." Imagine a handsome man like Samir, whose face was red from health, dying of an acute drop in blood circulation from the amount of torture he saw and the blood he was bleeding. Look what the powerful woman did to her husband. I saw the pleasure in her eyes. I saw the cruelty in her heart. If this Sowad were from the jinn, her heart would have been kinder than that. Samuel spoke quickly as if he remembered something and was afraid of forgetting it. He said, "What is even more enjoyable than that is Safia's story." Here, Haja Tahani and Siham started crying hysterically. Sheikh Mohammed shouted at them in a very loud voice. The first time I had ever seen him like this. Looking into Samuel's face, he said, "Get out, all of you, get out. I only want Syed here." Before he could finish, Siham had opened the door and left the room, followed immediately by Haja Tahani. Ali said, "No, Sheikh, I won't leave." Hassan said, adjusting his clothes and feeling his head from the impact with the wardrobe, "I won't leave either." The Sheikh looked with hawk-like eyes staring at Ali and told him, "Fine, stay, but don't let out a sound." Ali and Hassan didn't speak. They just moved their heads in a nod of agreement. Samuel took a deep breath and continued. This Safia was a powerful woman, the one in control of the house, dominating her husband with her tyranny. She was 63 years old. She married late because she had always been a harsh, difficult woman. Her son, Shadi, was in his final year of university and was involved with a girl. But oh, Sheikh. Samuel half closed one eye and shook his head slightly to the right, saying, "Ah, Sheikh, she was an angel. Her name was Maryam. Forgive me, I cannot describe her. No words can describe that creature." He turned to mockery with a diabolical smile. "Anyway, Sheikh, let me not distract you with my romantic adventures." Shadi went to his father and told him he wanted to propose to Maryam. His father loved him very much because he was his only son, so he agreed. But Shadi is an idiot because the word in that house isn't his father's. The word belongs to his mother. Safia, his mother, did not agree, of course. How could her only son marry someone she didn't know and who wasn't under her control? He continued with the same arrogance, pointing his finger at his head. How? Then he spoke seriously. Safia said, "You must marry your cousin." Shadi, with intense anger for the first time in his life, I personally don't know how he got that angry, said he would not marry anyone but Maryam. After much exhaustion and Shadi's persistence, and because he was the only child, his mother, despite her hard heart, loved him very much and agreed under pressure. Indeed, Shadi married Maryam. Only 20 days passed and Safia began to go crazy. She imagined that because Maryam had a personality, her son was a weakling. He returned to the same arrogant style. Of course, who else but, "Yes, that's him, Syed." Here he looked at me with a gaze that made my soul depart and my limbs freeze. He continued laughing, but not loudly, saying in a grand voice as if announcing an important figure, The sorcerer Mahmud. Safiya went to the sorcerer and made a strange request that shows Safiya's kindness and great tenderness. She told the sorcerer Mahmud about her son's story and said she wanted to hurt Maryam. She said she wanted her alive but insane, meaning Shadi would be afraid of her and hate her. Of course, the sorcerer Mahmud didn't refuse the money and agreed immediately, even though the amount paid wasn't large. He continued, closing his eyes for seconds and opening them quickly. Of course, Sheikh, you have memorized the requests and the method of preparation, but this time the quantities were different and the incantation was different and the play began. We started with Maryam gradually. Sometimes she felt someone was in the room with her, but Maryam had good nerves. She didn't believe much in the subject of jinn, so I increased the dose. She began to see a vision of an old woman in the apartment with her. Here, Samuel raised both palms to shoulder level, saying, "This part requires a strong heart." He looked at Ali and Hassan and said, "Why are you still standing? Sit down. We still have a long way to go. Listen carefully and don't drift away, so you know that what I will do to Sabah is much less than what I have done before." He signaled for Ali and Hassan to sit. Hassan sat down, looking at Sheikh Mohammed, saying, "There is no power or strength except with God." Samuel went mad. He transformed and spoke with a voice that seizes souls, pulling your soul from its depths. His eyes protruded and became entirely red. Many scars appeared on his body, with very thick hair on his face, ears like bat ears, and many spines on his back like a porcupine's. He said in a voice that seemed to come from the walls, "Here in this room, Hassan, you are not under the protection of any religion." Sheikh Mohammed looked at Hassan and swallowed his saliva, a sign of anxiety. From his look, I understood that we were all being held by Samuel, and he alone would do with us whatever he wanted. Samuel calmed down and returned to Saba's form again. He broke the silence and said, "Where were we? Oh, I remember. Of course, Maryam told Shadi what she was seeing. Because Shadi is an educated and rational person, he didn't believe Maryam. He thought it was just hallucinations because Maryam was staying alone." Samuel pursed his lips in disappointment. Shadi didn't care and forgot about it. Samuel looked back at Sheikh Mohammed and said, "Imagine, Sheikh, when you wake up and find two large black dogs with red eyes and long tongues reaching the ground, their fangs longer than a lion's, their voice coming from their bellies, a terrifying roar, a mixture of a lion's roar and a wolf's howl from a brown bear's throat." Of course, her scream woke Shadi up. No, not just Shadi, the whole street woke up. Samuel looked at the ceiling as if telling a romantic story. Of course, Shadi woke up terrified and saw the horror on Maryam's face. She was standing on the bed screaming hysterically. Shadi stood by her, hugged her and said, "Calm down, it's just a nightmare." Maryam didn't feel Shadi's hug. She kept screaming with the same terror, pointing her hands at the floor. "Look, Shadi, dogs. There are dogs in the apartment." Shadi looked where she was pointing, hugged her more, and kissed her head. "Calm down, sweetheart. There's nothing, just you and me in the room." With the last letter of Shadi's sentence, the two dogs disappeared. Maryam collapsed even more. Samuel leaned toward Sheikh Mohammed. Maryam fell asleep after the sedative injection given by the psychiatrist. Samuel raised his left eyebrow. This was after Safiya came up from the apartment below them, and the neighbors gathered at the door. It was a huge scandal. Samuel lay back on the bed and looked at the ceiling. After a few months, Maryam got a bit tired and went to the doctor while Shadi was at work. The doctor told her, "Congratulations, you are pregnant." She was very happy and went home immediately. Rejoice, Shadi. Mariam was sitting alone in the apartment, holding her phone, talking to Shadi on WhatsApp. She felt a hand holding her left palm. She looked at her hand and saw a child's hand with white, wrinkled, blue-tinged skin, like a child drowned in water for years, with protruding blue veins and white eyes without pupils. Samuel rose to get as close as possible to Hassan's face, exactly like my eyes. Then he ended with a terrifying roar. Hassan fell from the bed to the floor. Samuel laughed. Of course, Mariam screamed, but this time without stopping and with no one to rescue her until she lost consciousness. She woke up on the bed. Samuel looked at Sheikh Mohammed. Good job, Sheikh. Correct. Safia called Shadi and told him Mariam was screaming. Shadi arrived in the blink of an eye with the psychiatrist, who told Shadi that Mariam suffered from auditory and visual hallucinations. They decided to give her treatment. Samuel took a deep breath. Of course, Mariam's condition worsened with the medicine. Her angelic face, well, I looked better than her. He gave a loud but not scary laugh. Samuel went silent for seconds. We reached the end. With the medications, she slept a lot. One day she woke up to a face with a head larger than a rhino's, with tusks like a wild boar's, very black, smelling foul, with vertical slit eyes. She ran to the street. Samuel looked at Ali. "Does your heart ache?" Ali didn't answer, only his tears did. Samuel continued. Mariam miscarried her son. Shadi finally understood it was jinn. He brought Sheikh Mohsen. We left not because of him, but because the pay was low and we had done enough to Mariam. Samuel then broke the chains on his hands and feet easily. I am free. Ali swallowed his saliva from fear. Samuel crossed his arms. Imagine Sheikh Karim Jalal, a child, an orphan. He is 8 years old, clean, pure and innocent. No one ever saw anything bad from him. He was beautiful, intelligent, and his heart was like a white rose. His father was a very wealthy man. He had Karim late in life. Jalal had a brother named Yasser, who was married to a very greedy woman named Nora. Yasser and Nora were of average status. They bore the exhaustion of the world and life's problems. Yasser endured Nora's constant nagging, and Nora endured Yasser's negativity, hoping that Jalal would die so they could inherit. After Jalal had Karim, everything changed. The world turned black in the eyes of Nora and Yasser. Every time they remembered they would live and die in this poverty and misery, they wished for death every minute. One day Nora thought about getting rid of Karim and opened the subject with Yasser. Yasser said to her, "If we get rid of him and the police find out, we will be imprisoned and live a life worse than the one we are living now." Nora said to him, "No, we won't get rid of him with our own hands. We will get rid of him indirectly." Yasser raised his eyebrow, saying, "I don't understand." Here, Samuel uncrossed his arms, stretched his legs, and looked up. Some changes appeared on his face, Saba's face, like his ears growing longer, his eyes widening and turning red, and scales like crocodile scales began appearing on his face. He continued. Nura said, "Let's make a spell, Amal, for him that gets rid of him safely without drawing attention to us." At this point, Samuel approached Hassan, who stood up out of fear. Samuel said, "There is no one but the sorcerer Mahmoud. He has a great reputation in lower world magic." As Samuel was walking toward Hassan, I saw small hair on his back and large thorns near the arms. Samuel continued. Yasser went to the sorcerer Mahmoud, and of course, the sorcerer Mahmoud did a good job for him. Here he stepped back, looking into Sheikh Mohammed's eyes, and in a voice mixed with a roar, he said, "Sheikh Mohammed, the same method and the same style, but the incantation and quantities change. This time the incantation is deadly fear." He laughed a very loud laugh that knocked a picture frame of Saba off the wall. "I won't lie to you, Hassan, this time I knew I was among the dead and that everyone in this room would not leave it and would perish in it." Then Sheikh Mohammed, Syed, started drifting again, as he was at the beginning of the story. He said, "Samuel lived in all of Karim's toys. He was with him daily. Not in Karim's body, but in Karim's toys. When night fell and people slept, all of Karim's toys would move. Karim would wake up to a voice calling his name in the darkness of the room. A hoarse voice, as if the throat had been cut with a knife. Karim opened his eyes to a terrifying shape standing in the dark. Something between a human and an animal. A huge body covered in hair, a face like a dog but without ears, large fangs and saliva dripping on the floor. He had small hands like a kangaroo's and feet like a bear's. He looked at Sheikh Mohammed and said, Karim, out of intense fear, didn't utter a word. All his limbs were paralyzed. He couldn't even scream. After a minute and a half of being frozen and paralyzed, he lay on the bed and covered his head with the sheet, imagining he was hiding. But from under the sheet he saw the shadow of that thing moving toward him. Karim couldn't breathe. He was about to die of suffocation. Here, Samuel's features changed even more. Fangs began to appear, and his mouth started growing gradually. We were all in shock, afraid to speak, fearing that the first one to speak would be the first to die. Samuel continued. What made Karim able to move and run through the whole apartment was that his favorite toy came under the sheet with him and spoke to him, saying, "Escape, Karim." Karim, in his fear, threw the sheet on the floor and ran at maximum speed without looking back. After that, Karim went to his father in his bedroom and jumped on him while he was sleeping. His father woke up terrified to find Karim on top of him. Galal asked Karim, "What's wrong, my son?" while holding him between his hands and joking. Karim was staring with wide eyes at the room's door, not uttering a word, as if he were dead but with his eyes open. After a long time, maybe 2 hours in this position, his father brought water and poured it on his face, and Karim, of course, showed no reaction, as if he were a toy doll. Then Karim uttered the word, El Baba, the boogeyman. Galal took a deep breath, raising both his hands as if he had achieved an accomplishment, and said, "Papa, my dear." Karim didn't reply. He remained frozen in his state, but moved his hands and pointed toward the room's door and repeated the word, "the boogeyman," again. All of Saba's features vanished completely, and Samuel appeared in his true form. It was something hideous that cannot be described. A foul smell, ears like bat ears that were very long, the spikes on his back turned into wings, and thick hair leaning toward a green color covered his entire body. His eyes were red and oval, and his jaw was like a lion's jaw. His hands were like human hands, but with long fingers and claws and very long legs that didn't match the upper half of the body at all. Samuel continued as if nothing had happened and said, Galal told Karim, "My son, there's nothing. You're surely dreaming. There's nothing outside." Samuel looked at me in his terrifying form and said, "They stayed like that until morning." Galal didn't sleep at all, and Karim only slept when he got tired and couldn't resist sleep anymore. Then he put his hand on Sheikh Mohammed's shoulder, and here Sheikh Mohammed shuddered. Samuel didn't comment on the Sheikh's shuddering, as if he expected it, and continued his story. In the morning, Karim woke up to play with his toys as if nothing had happened. Here, he leaned over Sheikh Mohammed and pressed harder on his shoulder, saying, "Of course, Galal thought to himself that Karim just saw a nightmare and forgot, and everything was fine. But on the same day at night, the whole house slept, but Karim didn't sleep. He was waiting to see the boogeyman sitting on the bed, hugging his legs and putting his face between them until the boogeyman appeared in the same place. But he wasn't alone. He had all of Karim's toys with him, but their forms were demonic. Even the teddy bear that Karim loved and used to pat with his small, gentle hands was like a devil. They were all moving toward him. Here, Karim ran screaming. This time he was able to scream. Galal woke up to his son screaming and ran to him terrified. Karim uttered his last word while pointing at the room's door and said, "El Babo." That last word, El Babo, came out of Samuel like the end of the universe, a sound like a lion's roar coming from his guts. Samuel looked at Sami while still holding Sheikh Mohammed's shoulder and said, "Karim became mute, Mohammed. I, Sami, and Ali couldn't control our tears." Samuel looked at all of us in order and said, "No, there's still a bit more. The matter didn't end with Karim. His condition began to worsen. He wasn't eating or drinking, and he was always staring blankly. By the way, every day Karim saw hell, but he couldn't speak. The child who was more like an angel than a human didn't speak. He saw agony and didn't know how to express it. He tried hard to make his father understand through signs that there was a boogeyman, but his father didn't understand. Karim grew weary of trying to make his father understand, and signs of the devil's control over him began to appear. One day, Galal found a cat in their garden, crucified on 2 tree branches, tied by its hands and feet, and its face was burned to a crisp, but its body was as it was. Its chest was opened vertically, and its heart was not in its place. Galal was terrified by the sight and grabbed Karim by his left arm and said sharply, while pointing to the crucified cat, "Who did this, Karim?" Karim looked into his father's eyes with utter spite, as if he were the devil himself, and pointed with his right hand and index finger to his own chest, signaling the word, "I did." Galal was shocked and sat on his knees, trying to catch his breath and gather his words, stuttering as he said to Karim, "Where is its heart?" Karim pointed with the same innocence and the same finger to his mouth, signaling the word, "I ate it." Here, Samuel entered with his demonic laugh mixed with the word, "I ate it." Samuel continued blankly. Galal grew anxious about Karim and took him to a psychiatrist. Imagine, Sheikh, a child like this at this age going to a psychiatrist. By God, it's a shame. What is this culture that descended upon you? Where are the sorcerers? The doctor, after examining Karim, told Galal, "Karim has nothing. He is 1,000,000% sound, better than me and you." Here, Samuel removed his hands from Sheikh Mohammed's shoulder and said in sorrow while looking at the ground, "Inflammations began to appear on Karim's body. He started waking up every day wounded or burned, and Karim's father thought this was due to his psychological state because he couldn't speak. One day, Galal saw Karim standing in his room talking to his teddy bear, and from the way of the discussion, Karim was angry. But wait, Karim doesn't even speak. Galal's eyes widened, and he walked 2 steps toward Karim's room and stood outside the door. Then he was frozen in place when Karim pulled out a knife and slit the toy's belly with it. And Karim looked at his father from inside the room, and his eyes were glowing as if they had light bulbs in them. Of course, Galal was terrified and afraid to even take 1 step toward his son Karim to stop him. He barely uttered the word Karim loudly, and here the door of Karim's room was slammed in Galal's face. With the passing of days, I caused internal wounds for Karim to the point that he started bleeding from his mouth and nose. One day, the house woke up to a painful scene. Karim lying on his bed, and next to him his teddy bear torn apart and drenched in blood. And the toy's wing was hovering over Karim's neck, stuck in it. Karim died. At this point, Sheikh Mohammed went mad and lost his mind. He said at the top of his voice while looking at Samuel's face defiantly, "O enemy of Allah, O devil, burning is a mercy for you." And he began to recite Ayat al-Kursi. At that moment, I knew that the first person to die would be Sheikh Mohammed, specifically when Samuel began to repeat the Quran after him verse by verse. We all moved far away from Samuel's place as he was growing. Yes, Samuel was growing larger, and a long tail appeared on him like a cow's tail, and his head split in 2 and he became 2-headed. The shock appeared on Hassan's face as he said, "Samuel with 2 heads." Hassan went silent for 30 seconds and then continued. Sheikh Mohammed continued reciting, and Samuel kept laughing with a voice that pulled out all our souls. Samuel began to say incomprehensible words and laugh loudly, and Sheikh Mohammed continued reciting the Quran. Suddenly Samuel scowled, screamed, and grabbed by his neck, lifting him off the ground by about a meter. Samuel's fingers were larger than Sheikh Mohammed's neck. With his other hand, he was moving his claws on the Sheikh's cheek. Suddenly, something like an explosion happened, as if a bomb blew us all into the air. We hit the ceiling and fell to the ground, and we all lost consciousness. But before I closed my eyes, I saw Samuel return again to Saba's body and begin to melt as if he were a plastic doll placed in a microwave. We woke up and everything had ended, but we were all in good condition. Just some bruises and scratches. Of course, the house turned into a funeral for the soul of the late Saba. We went out, and here a man's voice interrupted Hassan, saying, "Everyone, get out. We are going to perform an autopsy on this body." This was the voice of Dr. Hazem, the forensic doctor. As soon as Hassan heard this, his tears froze. He stood up from the chair, looked at the doctor and said, I must stay with him. I won't leave him." The doctor replied with indifference and haste, "Stop it, you crazy man," and looked at the security present. There were 3 of them, and said, "Get them all out." By force, Hassan was taken outside while crying more and more. After 15 days, the forensic report came out, stating the cause of death as unknown. There were strange marks inside the body, including burns, inflammations, pus in the liver, charred lungs, incomprehensible letters on the kidneys, and on his skin from the inside was written, "Samuel." Where have you heard this talk before? If you don't remember, go back and listen to my story from the beginning. In your opinion, did Samuel die, or is he still alive? And will Hassan leave Samuel, or will he try to take revenge on him?